Soyelame Kala Sovane Mankadonyan Bisenja Tanje, Manchelana Mipayun, Tababi Bosunji, Pomporomboche, Jenichu Tobacha, Teacher the Tambichu, the Nisani, Tanya Sano Jogambi, Samba Shonshi to the Sensibi, Gonis and Bansar.
Rinpoche first requests us to enter into this afternoon's teaching in the spirit of the Bodhisattva and wishing to study in order to be able to eventually bring each and every sentient being throughout the infinity of space to the state of utterly pure, totally perfect and most precious enlightenment. In our study of Dharma, then this afternoon, in our study of these three main levels of Buddhist vow or precept, we're looking at the second level, the Bodhisattva vow. And there are many sections in this part of the Control Rinpoche's chapter on Bodhisattva vow, dealing with its essence or its definition and so on and so forth. And this afternoon we'll be looking at, once one has acquired the vow, then how to nurture that vow and protect it from loss or deterioration. And yesterday we saw that there are, amongst those who take the Bodhisattva vow, those who are very intelligent and sharp of their faculties, those who are average, and those who are not so bright or not so well endowed for the practice of bodhicitta. And we saw that for those who have the dullest faculties, then there is simply one thing to observe, which is to never reject the bodhicitta. So today we'll look at the downfalls for somebody of middling ability. The downfalls for this average practitioner come from a text which is called the Bodhisattva Levels, or Bodhisattva Bhumi, and in there we find there are 4 downfalls for the average.
Tini, Ombo member here, Telishadu. Not that at all. Ombo, check on it. Tata Tombo, chili on the Tombo. Tombo, dear guy, you want. Tata. Don't get Tombo, teaching you. Tombo, give me an idea. Tombo, chili cashes, I said, Oh, that did it. Yeah, good job. You don't do it. When they don't want to member the Ninji, any Umbora is in the Higore, Onola Umbora, Tamasi, Mangol Malay, the Chevere. At the age of Benoni, Tombono, Doto Yamobadi, Tatombo, the Chile.
So, sorry for the delay. The first of these 4 downfalls is to praise oneself and to put other people down, and this is mainly through seeking good reputation or material gain.
Ndiri yana yon meba chena yon ta don demba muni chon di mendu lana korona phensu da yo ba chena yana meba chena yon ndiri ta de ta ba ma yin ba ta chodong ji ko ni ta rong shu ya bo yin ya su di cho re so ta nga ro su du ji mong cha da ta chodong ji ko ni ta rong ni shu rong ga sa tan sa ta zhu bo ta pe ya bo re rong ma ga sa ta pe du cho re se ni ya su la dong rong su la cho ta tin di go ni ni to ba do me ba xie na ni xiong ji san bi ge zai yu dong an yong de de na tin di xie chu me ni.
As far as this praising oneself and putting other people down is concerned, in some circumstances, if a person really does have qualities or accomplishment and it's useful for other people, then it's okay to say what has been achieved or what has been understood or what realization there has been. If this is done without any selfish motivation, then saying that sort of thing is okay. However, this is rarely the case, and most of the time when people are praising their own qualities, it's out of either attachment or out of aversion. There's always this polarity of being having your own friends and close people, and sort of the ones who are in for you, and then the ones who are on the outside, and one wants oneself and those close to one to be put up and elevated, and those who are outside to be put down. So if that's the motivation, it's a bad thing. And then if, on account of that, one is announcing qualities that are not possessed, then this is a root downfall for the bodhisattva vow.
Topashe, Ganla Mipashe, Duchoshe, that Tindishina, Talana, Chodong Penny, Timi Yanton Jayong, Saint Chipomiba, Dunghal Deba. Tini, Ronyon, Tatelan Penny, Chodong Pe, Saint Chipomiba, Tini, Ronja Tomji Lion, Tatero, Munishina, Pemba Mipa Mazi, no matter what you chomare. Runila, Topashe, Yanlam Hepashe, Ronsula Topashe, Yansula Hepashe, Denisena, then Trupa Mombo to Yanton Jayon, Dunghashe, Tani so je pala so ba ta tani mo bu shong wa ra de yong ye ka ri de na ta rong su chok yan su la dong de tani la de ni shong wa re ta de yong ya bu ba ma re de ho pong ga ji da re sang jia tong ji la no pa ji ji de me de la pen ba me bi chen na ne ta de za wi dong wa ni ji ji yo ga no ji de.
If one looks into what's happening here, then it's very clearly an unhealthy thing all around. If through one's own attachments and to close ones and to oneself and aversion to others, then the person is elevating themselves, putting other people down, then first of all, as far as the person is concerned, it's nurturing defilements, negative emotions. It's making their own confusion and defilements worse. At the same time, it's making other people feel uncomfortable because of what's being said. It creates a competition, it creates jealousy, it can end up in conflicts, people separating into groups. Sometimes even people kill each other because of this sort of thing. So it's very obvious to see that it does no good for the person who's doing it. It does no good for those around them. It's something that's an unwholesome thing. And as far as the Bodhisattva vow is concerned, it's totally against the spirit of Bodhisattva vow, and it's something through which we lose that commitment.
So, ta chudo nor mate pa seje da rong la nupa me na chudo no martina yung dipare yana yung ronya la nupa yo yanda ta yan la no ndona ne phem to ba chudo no marte pa la di tira phem to ba ndona deni no bena no ta chunda wo yina yung rong la no ta te pa gari da wo ji ge sanjia la pen tuzi xie jiu na de yong xie ru me xie ba me xie ba ta den di xie ba dong den yong rong la de zu ji be xiang de wo yin nan da ji ji ba nu long xiu ya bu yo na den yan la yong yin ba dong yan la pen ba me xie ba ta den di xie ni sen na xie na den yong za yi dong a niu a re da ge ni ba de.
The second downfall is not to give when one's able to give. This can mean either giving material things, wealth or help, or it can mean giving Dharma teachings. So, of course, if one doesn't have any wealth, if one doesn't have the knowledge that's required, then you've got nothing to give. But what we're looking at here is when you do have the possibility of helping out financially, materially, however it may be, in a physical way, and you don't. When there's a need there and you could help and you don't help, that loses the vow. And it's the same with Dharma teachings. If for whatever reason you don't give teachings that would help somebody, the advice that would help somebody, or that they ask for, that they need, for some self-centered reason, then that also is a lack of generosity. It could be because of many concerns, could be also through financial concerns. In either way, not giving when you can give is something that's a root downfall and causes one to lose the bodhicitta vow, bodhisattva vow.
Te indi la rong la nu pa ka yo ko yo don na yan la yin ba dong ta yan la ro pa xie ta den di xie ji de ka ji bo ren du ni chu shu ni song no dong ga na yong ta chu xie ji de bien na ne song ji ge song ga yin da wo na ro ma xin da yong ndi du ga ri de na chu xie ji de song ji ge song xie den di song no dong nian men du chu xie ji de dong da ga ri de na ma la pen tu ji Mula Deva Tuzi Tondotari Chulana. The Inditirana Malana Panto 몰라는 대화야 보시지 바로 가르치 키나요 당도 뜻출해도 말해 손지 그 송공이 놓라 산지라 팬토 산지라 눈감이 봐 산지라 대화 토지 손지도 취니 송어리 빈두들아 당가롱고 너는 거고니 카 가르치 키나 산지라 팬토지 산지라 대화 토지 다 공기 키 라지기 달라는 야불하 다 들리시디나 너는 동화 문주바 들리인디텔라나 대차 이야라 야보시 말라바 다 들리시디나나 말로서 동화 주도.
As far as the gift of Dharma is concerned, and of course, a place like this is a place of the teaching of Dharma, then we should give really whatever we can. We should share whatever we can of the Buddha Dharma with others in any way that it can really be of help to them. And if it's the authentic Buddha Dharma, then we have no doubt about it, because the Dharma, by its very definition, is what helps beings. That's what the Dharma is. It's not a doctrine. It is a set of things which are, by their very nature, helpful. The Dharma is also what the Buddha taught. He was the most enlightened being, so it's the Buddha's speech. Dharma is, by its very nature, a cause of happiness. And so, for those reasons, if we are passing on the pure and original Dharma, then there is no doubt of it being a good thing. So, whenever it is appropriate, when it's needed or requested, and however much we know and understand of it, then that should be well said and given as the gift of Dharma to another person.
니너 다 선바들이 다 선바라고도 다 가래라고 지리지나는 연거 롱라 다 공터라고라 다 대조지 문디바고 숑 딘디시나 공터라 다 딘디시 껴봐 시나요 다 대라 키만봐 저 송송송송세 다 뒤져라 디면제 다 롱라 옹샤요나는 대라 동제 다 딘디라 소바 시나는 동안 좋아래 자유 동안 선받은 좋아래 대인들라 대차용 연거다 니바효 딘디시나 공터 라 효바시 딘디시나 용 대라 키만봐 다 딘디시나 용 리문도 되는 거지도 효바래요 어디 키량거든.
The third downfall is not to accept an apology from somebody who's hurt you, who's harmed you. And in the text it says not to accept an apology, and then on account of that to resent, even to be physically violent to somebody. But the main point is that even though they've said sorry, even though they've apologized, that we don't accept the apology, and we resent them. We carry that resent within us. Carrying that resent, even though the person tries to make amends, breaks the bodhisattva vow.
Then give the don't you run on bars? Takaril Lavarana, Chumayim Pala Chus, Giba. Tachumayim by Chus Gibalajit Caterina, Chunolana, Yaposena, Givayo Paris. Giva say the Cardinal Regina, Diatore Sivare. Dubosena, Dipayore, Sonre, Magabasena, Tadipa said Caregina, Dunga Jewelry Sisire, no Suduna. Taina, Yaposena, Divayo Pari, Dubosena, Dungayo Pari, Tenison Pari. Tarana, legendary is in Mitopari. Penan, lay Yaposena, Dreve Deva Yaposinato. Lay the George Siena, Dreve Dunga Juato. Talana, lay Latin, Dreve June, say, Sonji John and Digo, legendary is Tira Mito Pari. Ta, the Yopa marriage. 야부 시엔다 동하요 말이 두부 시엔나요 대화 토리 따봐 너나는 드니 많이 빨라 연반이다 다 드니 시엔나 또 아니오래서.
The fourth thing which breaks the bodhisattva vow for this middling type of individual is to not teach the Mahayana Dharma, but to teach non-Dharma under the pretense of Dharma. In other words, you're pretending you're teaching Dharma, you're teaching the truth of Buddhism, but in fact the ideas you're presenting go against the very grain of Buddhism. So at the very heart of Buddhism are the teachings on karma. They show us that when we do helpful, positive, virtuous actions, then these actions, beside their short-term benefit, are also what bring in the future for their doer happiness. And the very fibre of the Buddha's teaching shows us that when we do harmful things, they don't only cause trouble in the short term, but also for their doer, they bring suffering in the future. So say somebody was explaining to somebody else an idea which flies in the face of that, which says, oh, it's okay if you do that, which is a harmful action, in the future there won't be negative consequences, or there will be some happiness coming out of it, or if they deny the good that comes out of virtuous actions, but they present that as being a true Dharma, something that's what's really behind the teachings, then that is it. Again, this is the fourth of the downfalls.
Sancha Kaswala Dunhayo de Tirana, De Tomji Yapotuzi, De Tomji de Devatuzi Shegari, Zawangama Tere, that's Soya. De Indulana, using Sarah Chusumava Tabo, Donano, Dujo, Tendisi, Tendila, that is over Sancha La Dula Ja, Sancha Dunatina, then Zayitoma, Yabat, Chosma, in what you give out the new marriage. 다 대송사다는 다 가리송원이 일하는 다 더리기야 송사노라 다 들이송어버리 다 온본링거 다 년에 제제 다 대에도 있지 뭐를 좀 와라디 돈도도 이게 아마도 다 기대면 매래.
This fourth one is, for instance, to say that some sort of killings are okay, whereas the Buddha's teaching shows us that killing is a harmful thing to do. Then this could say that some sort of killing is okay. Or it could say that the 6 realms of beings, which are taught through Buddha Dharma to have innate suffering, that suffering is a very characteristic of all the different states of being, would be to play down that suffering and to present some of the states of existence as a happiness that they don't have. This sort of thing, which is the opposite of the Buddha's teaching, causes one to lose that fourth. It's the fourth way of losing the bodhisattva vow. So here we have 4 things. When we had those of duller faculties, there was just one main thing to remember. Here, for those of average faculties, we have 4 very important things to remember, and 4 things through which one can lose the bodhisattva commitment.
Nino Tana Ombora Lana Ta Jabolan Junior Nino Lombolan Junior Tani Bonlan Junior Hasi Ta Jabolan Junior Nga Lombolan Junior Nga 다 몽파발라 그나라 대찰라는 중에와 제대 다 자도 조지라고 되게 바로 공고라. 우리 다들 되게 송자자도 저기 공주 보고 단디 봐진데 이 저기라고 지으면 돼.
네, 주시.
동생जो 롱보 당연히 이게 통 눈이 어디까지 가는데 원하는 원하 잡는 중에 왕아 니만 좋더니 롱보라 시는 니만 동체녀 봤어 원되는데.
Now we move on to we move on to the commitments which are appropriate for somebody who has a position of responsibility. So here we are looking at those with the highest responsibility, which are kings, those with great responsibility who are ministers, and those who are, I don't know what we call them these days, local chiefs, those who have authority over not a kingdom but a smaller area. And so there are 5 for a king, 5 for a minister, and 8 for a local chief.
다 대노니 동보라 자보라 뉴니와 나가노니 다 동보 간데리라나는 공주고 공주파스 다 시샤가 그리 자보니 거빙이 봐요 메레 다 시샤 변하는 드님이 자보다바 총지 셈바도 롬보다바 총지 셈바 뭐 파바다바 총지 셈바시 다 빼겨 반다고 지레 그 말이 되면 다다 자보 빼뉴니레 드리나는 다더 많고 반다고 쳐고 말이지 다 자보다바 다 온자 빼침보체 롬보다바 온자 요바 드니 너뭐 파바다바다 저 온자 요바 대대 자통지 조 다 뉴니와 나세디디 조다 차를 다 리하본다고 진주 더봐 리하본다고 뉴니아체 요바레 다 더라데니 단들이 송오바레 디마 나로살아용 나로스 잡부 마레디 단주사만도 유송지 마레 나로살아 뉴아레디 조다 온차치 본다고 잡본다고 뉴 냥카 요바레 시진다고 든디레.
The first of these, which are the 5 downfalls for a bodhisattva who is a king, are for those of somebody with great responsibility. Now these days there aren't that many kings, and you might say, well, I'm not a king, or there's barely any kings left, so this is a bit out of date, a bit outdated. But really what it's showing us is the sort of responsibilities that a bodhisattva has when that position has a very, very high office, and that what they do and what they decide has far-reaching consequences. Those with very great power. It doesn't have to be necessarily a king, but somebody who's a head of state or somebody who's the head of a very large organization. It means those with immense power, those with quite a bit of influence, and those who are not just individuals but with some local influence. So that way we can apply it to ourselves. These aren't just for kings. These give us an idea of how a bodhisattva handles responsibility when we have responsibility.
드니는 다 광주고 꼭 초바시 동보다 히바리 다 광주 라디텔라는 당하로도 송지 주겐더시 다 드니서 히어바라 디고 초바시 디고 초바시지 간데레지나 송지라 포와 추라 포와 겐더라 포옹 이거 다디 다 베겨라 그나라 데라 잘로 가서 요지도 다 쟁오고니 초 쟁오고니 농거나 더니 송지 셈바가 자동 중화래 더니 따따라지나 시샤가 쟁보라고 지면나 다 초거나 뒤에서 갈리 가버려라 더가 잡보라고 이나 쟁보라고라 따따라네 되니 시와래 디나 다 나롱고 소이나요 뒤에서 유니바라고 요 되리오나 송지 주겐더 상거 다 잘로 나롱 초 따든지 시거는 드니 자유 동안 중화래 더 동보들이.
The first downfall is that of stealing the property of the precious ones, it says, means the three jewels, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Actually, it says stealing the property that's been offered to, or that belongs to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So this means usually the goods that are in monasteries, religious establishments, the statues, the wealth, any of the objects that are part of the Buddhist community. So if somebody is a king with absolute power, then it is, they do have actually the power to do something like that, to just confiscate the property of monastic communities for their own benefit, for their own treasuries, and or for some other purpose. Now, if that king happened to have taken the bodhisattva vow and then appropriated the monastic community's wealth, confiscated it, that causes the loss of the bodhisattva vow. Also for us, as regular bodhisattvas, taking the offerings of that belong to temples and the goods of monastic communities, if in some way we have some influence and that causes that to happen, that's also a downfall for us if we're bodhisattvas. The second downfall is, it says in the text, it just says to give up Dharma. But this doesn't mean that the king himself gives up Dharma, because that in itself would obviously be a loss, a downfall. If you give up the Dharma, you lose the commitments. It means to make people give up the Dharma. And this is something that a king can do by passing laws. He can make it illegal, or however it's done. He can command people not to do things. He can make it illegal to do things. And so this, if a king or a person in very great authority has the power to ban religious practice of Dharma, then that's a root downfall. They lose the vow. The third downfall for a king is to do harm to somebody who is a renunciate, someone who's a monk or a nun. And it doesn't matter whether that person has kept their vows well or not. As soon as they are wearing the robe and are representatives of the Sangha, then if the king in any way harms them, has violence done to them, has some punishment meted out to them, then that causes the loss of the vow.
Gendaba nola kiki tuhije duchola ta tachanda ure di matu yamba ta benana dachamba segana dachamba tata mandu tena ngarola njusa mandu tenina jayi kalanga sa yitwa kongana sonje kari sira ha ko mandu tata ta hon dezo yakali kabo mandu teni gendan kholu yan sejito ta tsenyi ba segana 너바노니 기타신 천이바 세거나 다다 오문도 가리거나 샤루퍼 몽가지 버요거바리 드니 그 수야 담바도 다지 지세 모고지 요바리 송제 요거바리 드니나 겐드 반두티 달라는 요와 라소바 몸보지 쩌요래 쩌온디 지마체게다 걔는 걸로 양용 티기고 봐 말이 다 조이노니 조 다중 개가다 파시바 마시바 다 되니라고 시세관나요 되니 뭐 자이 동안요 말이 대소디 될라 되기바.
The fourth root downfall for a monarch would be to commit any of the five, they're called sins of immediate consequence. And these are the five actions where the consequence is immediate on death. There's no intermediate state. One goes straight to the lower realms. And that's why there's that strange name, the five acts of immediate consequence or direct retribution. So those five are killing your father, killing your mother. It is to cause a split in the Sangha, to murder one of the Buddha's entourage, or to draw the blood of a Buddha, or to cause a split in the monastic community. So not all of those five can be practiced these days. It could be done anyway, because, for instance, the Buddha is gone, so we can't cause a Buddha to bleed, because there isn't one to cause to bleed. And then the Buddha's this worst sin, because you can't kill a Buddha. Buddha doesn't have the karma to be killed. It's impossible. You can only draw blood. But then the immediate entourage of the Buddha would be like the likes of his two main disciples, Shariputra and Moggallana, those immediately close to him, the elders. To kill one of those is one of these most gravest sins. And so then the main ones these days would be to kill one of one's parents. That's possible. Or to create a split in the monastic community. That's also a possibility, by setting the Sangha against each other, either individually or especially in groups, causing us to a point where it causes a split within the community. If a king does that, then it is a loss of the bodhisattva vow.
로바 인점바 다 로바 인점바라는 다 레전드 메바 다 세시마 메바 호야 레전드 메바 다 더리히야 레전드 세지다 더리 공디 해지 디 자도 기비가서 온 림보노 가서 해진다 버리 다 대지 해바다 다 드잘라용 메바다 이게라는 든디 세치바도 든디 요바 마리세요 쟁오고 다 든디 세관은 드니요 자기 동안이 말이 더 인디데라나 또 대소지 잼본다고 옹샹다고 가츠마 이게라 셋 캐치 근데 비나나 라도 소마티 통치용 데 든디 세관은 대소 잼본다고 진 근데 뭐야 드니너 공주고 공초거나용 대소 잼본다고 다 든디 그 말이 디나 자보란 주니 바시 든디 자본다고 치본다고 대소 인주니 바다고 다 드릴라 바래 다 얘나용 땅 아롱솔라용 대 공주고 공초 겐데 발라 동대시 하야 되니나 따뜻하시는 가롱솔라 용중하라 든디시디 데라나 더 자시는 자동주 말이.
Then the fifth downfall is for a king to adopt non-Buddhist views. These can be views of nihilism. They can be views that there is no karma, cause and effect. They can be views that there is no future life, there is only this life. And then the king would... actually it says it's just that the king himself adopts those views. Then that immediately causes the loss of the bodhisattva vow. And this is the same as what we had for the average or middling practitioner. Those five are downfalls for a king, and they're particularly powerful downfalls because a king is somebody who has a lot of authority and influence, and someone who's very much in the public eye, and so they have great consequences as downfalls. But of course, they are in themselves, each of them, negative things, causing the Sangha to be beaten or hurt or imprisoned, or causing a split in the Sangha, stealing the goods of monasteries and so on. All of those are downfalls for any sort of bodhisattva, but they are particularly important when it's somebody of great authority who does them.
다 니바노 다 롬보라는 주니바. 나. 다 드리요 바래 드리. 다 디노니 다 롬보란 주니바 나도 다 이겨도는 잡이가서 다 해요지고 광주고 권초바. 니 주봉아. 라도 중화진난다 처서도 된바 대통지 대바 아드니너 처음에바 마로라서 이겨서만도야 대동 다 디칼라는 종친 좀 봐라시 더가들이 이겨도 잡고도 집바래 다 대라는 롬볼란 주니와 나 정원도 대라는 다 사반다고지 가리오리라나 종친 좀 봐라시 다 종치를 지나 가로죠 조리 조지라서 봐서 배 중바 침보라 가서 건도 대자 통지 먹고니 주바진이 파장 매파시고 이들 다 들어이나 한만다고이나 롱보도 다 뜻이게 가리 되면 잡고 레칸다고 말아 잡을 차 이거니 되니 롱보 통지 주바제마 종예 매파시고 기고 바리 된다고라 건도 대인데라나 된가래.
The next we come to the 5 downfalls for a minister, or for somebody with a great amount of power, not a king. And here there are 5, and the first 4 are the same as the first 4 for a king, exactly the same. So there you've got the stealing the property of the 3 jewels, to cause people to give up the Dharma, to harm someone who's a monk or nun, or to do the 5 worst deeds. They're the same. The 5th one is that of plundering towns and villages. So this means sending in an army. This is the sort of power that a minister type of person would have. They would send in soldiers, send in the army, and wipe out a village or plunder a village, hurt the people. Of course, from this one decision of a minister, then very great misery occurs. So by making that order or that decision, then the bodhisattva vow is lost.
다 디노니 다 돈본다고 지가 내려지나 노멀라 사미 추기바 시든지 송와리 노 많이 봐다노 많이 봐서 가리지 고가와리라나 당화라 티바진 비출라 녀래시 만유캔라 드니 다 동녀 배야버리 동녀 강거리 세용다 드니게 바리 다 드니치 히나 가리 쳐노바리라나 대 당지撞着 바리 아 당지 동바이나 티베 켄탄다고리 가리레서 가서撞着 바리 대인디디라나 티바침부 리제마인 바 티바침부라 로용마뉴비 공소라 동년다고 동 용예용 나로서 송화가 노니라 요와도 좋아라 소게 그 추모보여 바리 대자 되니 대파면 비리지 공소라 땅히다 들리시나나 대통지 쪽 대통진지 야보숑 키워봐 말이 대인도 되니라나 나로서 들리시나 되니 자도 키워 바리 송지 셈비 도마 용게 지거.
Now we come on to the vows for people with regular people, and so then there are 8, and the first of these is to teach profound teachings to those who are unsuitable vessels. To teach profound teachings to those who are unsuitable. So that's the way it's expressed, unsuitable vessels, not ready for it. Mainly this means that if somebody doesn't have the Mahayana potential, they don't have the sort of mentality and understanding that goes with Mahayana, but nevertheless one's trying to force voidness teachings onto them, then what happens is not only they don't understand, but it can be very frightening. It makes fear, it sets a very bad blockage against any future development of the Mahayana. And so this is, simply by doing that, an ordinary person loses the bodhisattva vow. Also, this could be in the Vajrayana aspect of Mahayana teachings, that there are many secret things in Vajrayana to do with practice, to do with visualization. Again, if somebody is not ready, not prepared for that, not suitable for that, and one's talking about those things or trying to force ideas or practice onto somebody, again, it can be a source of great fear and anxiety and lead to negative consequences. It causes the loss of the vow straight away. The second downfall for ordinary people is to turn somebody away from their Mahayana path. And this could happen by telling somebody, oh, you don't want to do that, you'll never be able to work for the benefit of sentient beings, and you're quite a good meditator, so you can sit and meditate and you can free your mind totally. You'd be much, much better off giving your time to that, and don't bother with all that loving kindness and Mahayana stuff. It's not for you. You look after yourself, it's much, much better. This sort of thing, saying it to someone who has set out on the Mahayana path, so it turns them off, causes you to lose the vow. The third root downfall is to make somebody give up, or to encourage them to give up the pratimoksha vows. And so whether they have lay vows or monks' vows, nuns' vows, whichever one it may be, they're keeping the pratimoksha vows, and then you say the sort of thing like, that's no good, you don't need to do that. Come along and join the Mahayana. Come along and join, the loving, compassionate people of the Mahayana. You don't need the pratimoksha. You don't need to follow that way of discipline. Simply to have a loving heart and so on is all you need to do. By doing that, then you lose the bodhisattva vow, because the pratimoksha, it treats the pratimoksha, the self-liberation vows, as though they are something unworthy, as though they are something of no benefit. And it's the contrary. The pratimoksha vows are there to bring happiness. They're there as a cause of true and lasting happiness for people, and they're the basis of Hinayana practice and Mahayana practice. And to cause somebody to give them up is causing somebody to give up a cause of happiness. It's the exact opposite of the bodhisattva wish, and it causes the loss of the vow.
Tini yibada nyantu la kawandi ba. Tini nyantu yapo yoba mari, sonji yoba mari, tano drupon khenpo mari, yapo yoba mari tipe talana kawandi dujo la ta tiri sini na chongji samba te tangje ko tongju yo bare. Tini na yo nyantu la yo kawandi nyan bare.
To what are we up to now? Number 4, isn't it? Fourth one is to say, is to put down the Hinayana, to deprecate the lesser way. And this is to insult the lesser way, to say it's not really the Buddha's teaching, it cannot bring any benefit, and so on and so forth. And so, whereas the attitude should be respect, because it's part of the Buddhist ways, instead one treats it as though it were not part of the Buddha's teaching and of no or little value. And in particular, to say that it's not capable of overcoming a mind's defilements.
Tini ngaba no totu yamo ba. Oya ronyo to ba ji yan la me ba ji chodong ji go ni da dori gong di ong ji ke ba yin to che ba re oya ta de xian na yong dong yu wa re ta de ngaba.
The fifth one is the same as we had earlier on. It is to praise oneself and to belittle others. So it's exactly the same. Put oneself up, put others down.
Tani Drupana Ronyo Sam Tong Tu Yu Sini Yana Lobatawa Ma. The Karirina Ronyo Tu Me Yanda Chutanji Nilu in Ra, Tape music to pay music radio Trabato de Rawochi, Pichonji Samarawochi radio band Rawochi Seni, Yana Ngoko, Yana Zanki, Yana Don Lobanya the Ten. That Lissy in Nayo. The
sixth one is to make false claims about one's own realization. And this means claiming one's understood emptiness, voidness, deep teachings, or to give the impression that you are yourself a great bodhisattva, you're a realized being in some sort or another, and through that to turn the heads of other people, to confuse them, and then by the very fact that you're not a realized being but you're saying you are, then what you are teaching them or showing them is wrong doctrine. And this sixth thing also causes the loss of the bodhisattva's vow.
Tani ta dambad. Tani ta karre dina na ronyo on chibo go shu sieni. Tani yan la cheba jeje cheba. Tani na yan ga banjo long so la wa so ba ge ba. Tani ni di ngu pon da o to tani xie wong ji de yong on chibo la stage.
So the seventh one is to cause somebody in power to confiscate the goods of somebody else and then take a cut of that oneself. To cause somebody in power to confiscate the goods, the property of somebody else, and then accept part of that as a cut or a share of the profits. In one of the texts it says to cause a king to do that. So, but it's causing people in power. That's it. Said it twice already.
Kalikabore, then the Shady Dira, Machibo di Shushe, Machuju Dala Zamontu, the Joshie, Bena Tenida will Larry, Tan to Diga, then also Lil Habonaway, Bena Gombandino and Rawajidina, Ta, Dinoni, Madiku Dala Rupa Maje, Machimbo Honda Rupa She, Dae Tenida Shiji, no, Japanaway, Rinana, Dupola, Zamoton, Zambola. Jashoshi, Rushi, Tatanila Quare, Tinana, Tinana, Tonuare.
If we look at this in a wider sense, then it means pumping up the power of those with authority at the expense of those not so well off. And Rinpoche said this is something very, very easy to do because it's the rich who exploit the poor. Let's put it that way. Simple way of putting it. It's very easy for the poor to be exploited by the rich, and it's not that difficult to take the side of the rich to be somewhere part of the scheme and the plot that in the end is ripping off from the poor and making the rich richer. And in any sort of setup, there is this sort of, attraction to those in power, to those who have strength, to those who have authority, and there's a tendency to neglect those who are less well off, those who are the losers in a situation. And so it's very easy to join forces with the winners, and usually the winners are the winners because they win at the expense of the losers. So this, in a wider sense, is, if we don't take that specific sense, in a wider sense, it's quite easy to become part of that system of exploitation of the weaker by the stronger.
Tata carried Lana, Pena, Gombanda will chop up Pawangito, Hiedanda. Hiedagala, Pekanda would Pawangito, Dracola. Tatinicia on Jindo Carela Piana Tipina, did you operate the maybe ba? Maroso Gibo Jagos at Talaquari Pagini, then Dracola. Because Jatamba Chik Piona, Naronga, the corner that Gazamandia, Hiedala Kachin, Hiedala take up. Oh, yeah, and your last you get gone, Jenny Vitila Pekon of Piona. Pick a moment that Gazamandi, Coro, Atila, Hieda Tabanda Utila, Yamachila Pigola Gazanga Sanzino. Yona, Yana Sunjila, go Gondola Piona, to Gazamandi, Sonji, to Gazamandi, the inner Gendela Pigola Gazandis, Corongo Paje, 3J. That the Nisegana, Shoji Sambala, 200, Tayo, Narosoli, Labore, Narotandi.
The eighth downfall is to redirect funds which are destined for meditators and give them to scholars. So here, money. So when this actually injures meditation, because meditators are being deprived of their resources, and all of the funds are being channeled into those who either are just reading prayers out loud or studying, then if the person responsible for handling the funds is a bodhisattva, then by doing that they lose their bodhisattva vow. And so Rinpoche is saying, you say, oh, here's some money coming in from a sponsor, supposed to go to the meditators, but they don't need that. They're just sitting there meditating. Let's put it in the college. Let's buy some more stuff for the college. Or if there was a Buddha, then somebody comes with offerings for the Buddha himself. Buddha's the best of all meditators, and somebody says, oh, Buddha doesn't need that. Let's spread it out amongst the Sangha and their works. It's when there is this responsibility for channeling and allocating money, and if the money is then the priority, or if it's meant for meditators and one doesn't let it go to the meditators but rechannels it, then that loses the bodhisattva vow. And then Rinpoche said, it's maybe that not that difficult a thing to happen. I didn't say that, it says it in there. That happens. The police, the lights flashing, so the police have come now, but misappropriating the funds.
Taking from the scholars to give to the meditators is not a problem.
Tatala rinirawo yore. Ta riki karire lana pena ngaronsura ki amachila ki kepehyo ta nga pehyo tindu. Tanda ngarong dala pison piligare, hidala piligare, genda para piligare, lagon yijil gare, ta kare galere se ngaronda rutina. Tani ronga ota chorundi pina yapu yore lana nipa mandu. Ronga la chore. Churong ngaru tandi trawachi wona. Ta pena trawachi pena ngarong ko ta lagon lijila pilin da wujila wona. Yapu yo bari yapu mare chorong tela mapi deina Drupon la pika na yapu yore lana tani ndi to hanin yo bari. Rong la tina kare pigaleri lana rong tala yapu sindi la pindi pi yapu yore lana tala to anju mare. Korong ko jendo di to je cha ngarong pilin la ti pil chorong tela pina yapu yo mare tela pigaleri di pa chu je go na. Tani ndi to hanin yo bari. Ti to hanin yo jata tani yo bari. Tena ta to isi jebana ora.
If we look at this in practice, it's more a question of channeling the funds where you want them to go. So if somebody came, say to a teacher, and they say, well, I want to offer some money, they're a sponsor, and what do you think? Should I give it to the temple? Should I give it to the retreat house? Should I give it to the college? And so on. Then to give your own advice on that, that's fine. No problem with that. Say, oh, well, I think maybe it'd be a good idea to give it to the college. That's fine. Because the person's asking for the advice. But if somebody comes along and says, oh, I've got £100 to give, I'd like to give it to the temple. And then you say, oh, no, don't give it to the temple. It'd be much better if you gave it to this or gave it to that, and you're trying to channel the money where you'd like it to go, and not where the person originally intended, then this is what's being meant by this downfall. So once, if a sponsor has actually expressed an intention, then to encourage that intention.
jabolan junya wa ngato chapa chodi ora tse di tirana nguni ta ngaro sungsa ro tilan chege ro ndu ta to umbo ra no tse di tirana ta umbo tamala sungsa ji umbo dilan sungsa yo tani umbo ra la no sungsa chege ro oya ta ta ro umbo ta la tiani ta gong ta no ne sejire.
So there we've come to 8 for a regular person. Now all of these, the 5 for the king, the 5 for the minister, and the 8 for the regular person, all fall within the category of those with sharper faculties. When we look at these 5 for the king, 5 for the minister, and 8 for the regular person, it doesn't make 18 precepts, because 4 of them were repeated. The first 4 for the minister were the same as the first 4 for the king. So it meant there were 5 for the king, and then of the 5 for the minister we already did 4, so there's 1 extra, that's 6, and then 8 for a regular person, that makes 14. So these are listed as the 14 downfalls for a person of sharper faculties. And if we resume, this means for those of blunter faculties, there is 1 downfall to avoid. For those of average faculties, there are the 4 downfalls to avoid we had at the beginning of the talk. And for those of sharper faculties, there are these 14 downfalls to avoid.
Tsarala san yo judi nila niso dombi tsarala ombo ra rin tama san la shi tin ji ye woni de niso domba de na ni pa thong che sho ji ta ma je si du jo ta na mle je ki tsar de so ni de.
Now if we cast our minds back to yesterday, then you'll remember that these all fall within the context of 3 types of right conduct for the bodhisattva. The first type of right conduct is the right conduct of avoiding what is harmful. And the second one was right conduct of doing what's virtuous, third one of what benefits beings. So all of these downfalls for those of blunter, middling and sharper faculties are all to do with avoiding the harm. So these are all things to avoid because they're downfalls. Now if we come to the second area of right conduct, this is the right conduct of nurturing virtue. And this means developing all those wholesome, all those good and virtuous actions which themselves nourish the bodhisattva mind. As far as this nurturing of virtue is concerned, then there are 2 areas of advice. There's one area of advice concerning the bodhisattva's aspiration, or aspiration bodhicitta, and there's one area of advice for practice bodhicitta.
다 디노니 다 동본하고 가리가지네 걸리지나 생체 루모 봉바. 생체 루봉 세제도 가리지나 생체 지 생체 가통화도 말이 생체 가통화도 루봉지 말이 뭐지가 어디 시라바지도 봉지 말이 가리지나 롱라 제바체 롱라 가보지더라 세이나 또히오리디 옛나요 마롱소 소수시오가 라라라 코로 데아 토마토미 라라라 데아 토나가보 드니 쳐디고 바리 데다 마임바 생체 루마 봉바세디 생체 지종 루봉 뭐줘봐 생체 지 nga phe to bi data phe ma ro na nga phe to bi tu so ji che ho na yong ni ko ron la phe ma to ngni ko ya dan ni san che xie ro ba ta de yo wo na ndi ma du de yi ko ji do san che thong je de da nga ron ko phe to bi tu so ji de nga ron ko phe to ji song ji ko lo ya bu yo ko ta de
concerning the first area, which is nurturing the aspiration bodhicitta, then the first thing to do is never to abandon, never to leave out a sentient being from one's aspiration. There's probably a better way of saying that, but never to leave any sentient being out of the aspiration. And so this means even if one sentient being is excluded from one's bodhisattva aspiration, then that's a downfall. So we include all beings. So what does this mean in practice? It means if there's somebody where you think, even if I had the chance to benefit that person, to help that person, I wouldn't, for whatever reasons. But as soon as you find there's the thought in the mind of, I wouldn't help that person even if I could, then that person has been excluded from the bodhisattva wish, and then the aspiration bodhicitta has been lost. So then the way of nurturing the aspiration bodhicitta is whoever that sentient being might be, the attitude is always one of, all I want to do is help that person, to benefit that person. I want to benefit absolutely every single sentient being without any one exception whatsoever.
다 디페용제나 다 송시생 jel라용 캐디 베 야본두 뭐 파발로나 다 니깔 손노 동거나 니지용 캐지도 니지메 캐디 베 분주 치모도 송시생 자고용 캐디 베 야보레니 달라탄도 다 다들 손노 동거나요 다 송시생 메나 송지 토바 메바 송시생디 송지 토지 타가 많이 봐 다 대자라 대니 도나나 송시 생지培养 다 송시 생지培养 배 노디는 배 몽보 송어 버리 된도 주거나 니가라용 배도 첨부도 다들라용 배도 첨부도 다 상지가 디培养 용이 가로 생라 전지.
The second thing for nurturing the aspiration is to remember again and again the benefits of bodhicitta, to realize that this state of mind, this attitude we call bodhicitta, is the very thing that's going to take us to liberation and enlightenment. It's something of tremendous benefit. And by recalling that again and again, thinking of it again and again, then the bodhicitta aspiration is nurtured.
미치 소나지 쭉 메메기 쭉 다롱 공터다 초야 보서 다 되지셔지.
Then the third thing is to do what's called gathering the accumulations, or more properly establishing the accumulations. So developing those two areas of goodness, of wisdom and virtue, also nurtures it.
Then, Shonji Sandio, Goni Gondon, Pesi, Ta, Yoni Sonoto, Niji Cherry Rusi, Shonji San Yor Rusi, Taki, Sanjala, Niji Gam, Tatandi, Semejala Supala Gam, Ni, Taki or Shonji San the Yapian Rusi, Sanjala Pantu Tizi, Sanjala Pambasi Tizi, Ani Yoni Gonta the Sono, Tat there, Dala Yoni Gam, that the Lishage.
And then to ever develop compassion, and then the 4 limitless meditations, these are the things which really increase more and more and more the bodhicitta. So always to turn one's mind to loving compassion, to think of infinite love, infinite compassion, infinite sympathetic joy, and impartiality also.
Then Tati Kalano cannot jet. Gabuchu, Mabuchu, yes, and also cannot jet here you are. Oh, yeah, the Yapusegundu, Tati no Caridina, Tombo, Chogolavata, Nirin, the Segatundu, the Sinana, Pena, Naronga Tepasesa, Lamadon, Gagan, that was Segananda, that and then Chobago, Tobago, Pekia, then here, the love. Yoji. Then under the Rimajepa, Trombo Joba. The Sego de la Gabuchi, Nopuchi, the radio body, Yondos in the little more to do. The Sedana, Donana, Chogo, La Damajepa, Yojimajepa, Demba, Jepa.
Then also we have abandoning the 4 dark dharmas and practicing the 4 bright dharmas. And we'll take these together. There are 4 dark actions to avoid, and then their opposites are called the 4 bright or light actions, which are to be cultivated, and we'll take them in pairs because it's easier that way. The first of the dark actions concerns one's own Dharma teacher, and it is to lie to the Dharma teacher or to try to mislead the Dharma teacher. And the opposite of this is to always be perfectly honest and straightforward in dialogue with the Dharma teacher. So that's the first action to avoid and the first thing to cultivate.
Njoba me pala njoba sheba ta kare jina pena yapo ji shewa na yo ta chope du cho shi go du ta cho yapo re mundu cho ro tri ma ji na yapo wa ta nga kare so ti ju ko na njoba she ro bare de na pena geva dang ke dong char sung ke pena ji lama ji she go na wa cho lama she pe yapo re mundu selinda go ta nga ro mena geva ji yapo de senche la pya tu tin sin ta cho yapo re mundu ya ji she ni she go du se Nonana, Njopa Mepala, Ta Njopa She, Mesepa, Tenina, Tepa Chembo Chundao, Nijia, Chempesi, Tepa Chembo Chulanjo, Tiziji, Teni, Long Yapoji, Korapiajima, the Numela Njopa She, Machipa.
The second dark action is to make somebody regret an action which is not a regrettable action. Make somebody regret an action for which there is no cause for regret. And it usually means make somebody regret a virtuous action. So this will be if somebody's done some virtue, they've practiced generosity, some sort of right conduct, whatever it is, and you say, oh, shouldn't have done that. No. Oh my goodness. They've been generous, and you say, oh, now what are you going to do? You're so poor. Or they're expressing faith to their teacher, and you say, well, that's not a very good teacher actually, he's not that terrific, or whatever virtue they themselves are practicing, then you make them feel regret, as though they've made a mistake, as though they shouldn't have done it, so they've done something wrong. This is a dark action to avoid, and the bright action, which is the contrary, is to be very supportive and encouraging for each person in their own way of cultivating a virtue.
Tak senya sama du so tani sena o mandi bare uni ton lo pa do du chon da wo je suna do rong choro xie ji bi ni pa chi bo le ta xie nian le ma re de li xie de nga ro so lo ta zhe ge bare 야볼라 거래 마도 다 세냐 삼도 코로카리 인 조바시 지냐 삼고 제나 리면도 되나 우니 야볼라 다 조바시나 리지면도 되면 뒤절이나 초론 조바시 이제 다 초로 되지 마지라나 더 빼야보라 더 좋은지 생각을 드지리 되면 바보지 말이.
So this doesn't mean never saying anything critical to or about anybody. If somebody really is doing something harmful, dangerous, wrong, unvirtuous, then it can be very helpful if that can be pointed out in a skillful way and properly. And so, because that will help them not to do it, and it will help set them in the right way. So it doesn't mean only ever saying affirmative things to other people, affirming whatever they're doing. But if they're doing virtuous things, then to support it, not to put them off. But if they are doing non-virtuous things, to find the right way to help them out of that.
Tenina giba. Yoje mujiba. Yoje. Ta yoje lana na inana ngoko yala. 제도 송생하로서 드리지게 요바라. nga tani 다 들으면디 이봐 선발이라 미디마 해봐 소야 tani는 자시 송지 셈발라 추바 자시 송지 셈바세제다 가로서 시안리진라고도 사인이 보나고 또 다다가로서 통문디 들이라 고고문디 너나는 돈발롱 용케 송지 생지 돈발롱 용케 tani jela nije yonke shongji sen yonke ta ta shongji sen bala ga bare shongji sen yo na kola tar shongji sen bala ga ndi dio bare shongji sen me na ta shongji sen bala ga mare shongji sen yonke la la re ta tani la dona no hoya chupa che du jo la hoya ta tani che ga ndi mu du hoya te ta ba ma je ba hong hoya 디 용된지 더 야보요리 인지 캔 야보요리 중시생 야보요리 든디 강글리 델레야들이 야보시지들이
나서. Then the third dark action is to insult a bodhisattva. Now this doesn't mean the great bodhisattvas like Chenrezig or Akashagarbha or these bodhisattvas which are so wonderful but that we don't see. This means anyone who has taken the bodhisattva vow and who's maintaining it, then to say anything bad about them is a dark action, and on the contrary, the bright action is to always look for what's positive in what a person does and to say good things about the positive and leave it at that. So praising the positive qualities of other bodhisattvas and never deprecating other bodhisattvas.
이게 말이 다 생겨나 요지 뭐지 봐 요지 보마. 다 너는 요지 파 보니 되니 문이双바 정보 되니 정보 다 되니 야보 생겨나 시죠.
Then the fourth dark action is to deceive any being. In the first dark action, it was particularly to the Dharma teacher, deceiving or lying to the Dharma teacher. This fourth action is to be deceitful, twisted, crooked, underhand in relation to any sentient being, to mislead them for your own selfish purposes. This is the fourth dark action, and its opposite is to always be sincere, straightforward, and honest in dealings with other people.
다 대야도는 개와 추디지 처르노니 몽빌라자 다더래 근데 개와 추디지 처르노니 다 몽바도 주바니 옆에는 주빌라자나 바로 대신 맞죠 알았어 다 알아서 점바도 처르송 조바감 장주잠세 다더라 카토 하고지리 민도 하고지리 빌리라보 라고지나 건 가든이나 몽볼라데리 더차이 거지도 주빌라자 뭐야 다들이 되니까 몽주라자니 그다는 더 개와 추디지 처르 다 라자 다더래
Also, All of those pieces of advice that we just had, up to and including the last ones on the 4 dark actions and the 4 bright actions, are all advice for maintaining the bodhisattva motivation or aspiration bodhicitta, how to keep the attitude and state of mind correct. Still within this context of the right conduct of nurturing virtue, we have next the advice for nurturing the practice bodhicitta. And we won't go into the details of that now, but it's related to the 6 paramitas. And then for each of the paramitas, there'll be appropriate advice about how to avoid the opposites, the things which detract from it. So how to avoid what spoils or stops generosity, how to avoid what spoils or stops right conduct, how to avoid what spoils or stops forbearance, how to avoid what spoils or stops diligence and meditation and the development of wisdom. So the advice about nurturing virtue is specific for each of the 6 paramitas. Then the third area of right conduct, we've had avoiding the harm, nurturing the virtue. The third one is that of benefiting sentient beings. It's specifically directed at benefiting sentient beings. One of the main things in there is called the 4 virtues of gathering, or simply the 4 ways of gathering or nurturing disciples. The first of these 4 things, the 4 things that gather is to be generous to one's students, followers, disciples. And so this is, of course, for people who've got followers and students and disciples. And this is to be generous, however it may be, to be generous financially, to be generous with giving teachings, to be generous with giving texts or the supports of Dhamma. And this needs to be clearly understood as something that's done with the sole intention of making the disciple happy in the practice of Dhamma. If there's what it's not is being generous so that the disciple thinks, what a lovely teacher, or what a nice, kind teacher. If there's any self-interest, if one's doing this to gather a host of people around you who like you, appreciate you, and so on, then that isn't the bodhisattva motivation. This right conduct of properly gathering a following for those who are teachers, first is the sincere wish to make those people happy through generosity. The second of the four is to talk sweetly. Just talk sweetly. It means the ideas that are presented and the way they're presented should be harmonious and pleasant to hear by the disciples, by the followers. The third one is to give each person what is suited to them. And different people have different capacities. They also have their own different aspirations. So it's not a case of giving everybody exactly the same thing, but of seeing what really suits, what that person's longing to achieve or to hear or to practice, what they're capable of handling in terms of practice. And we saw in yesterday's teachings, that the Buddha Dharma is nothing but good, as we went through the different precepts of the self-liberation vows and then the bodhisattva vow. We saw that when it says not killing is something that harms other people, it harms the person who does it. There's nothing but bad. Preserving life is nothing but goodness. It's good for the person who does it. It's good for the lives that are preserved. The same for stealing, lying, all of these fundamental virtues. What the Buddha teaches is nothing but goodness. It's all common sense goodness. It's goodness that everyone can appreciate the value of, what we're supposed to avoid, what we're supposed to do. That's true. But then within that's all good, some of the teachings are more suited to some people than others. And this depends on their own capacities to start with, what they're ready for, what they're able to cope with. It also depends on their own particular inclinations and aspirations within Dhamma. So we saw, for instance, in the vows that as far as the lay people's vows go, there were the ones with the unusual names like the just a bit and a bit more and almost, where you've got the refuge plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, or plus 4 precepts. So these suit different people according to what they feel ready for, what they want to do.
Then don't turn the giver. The don't say don't turn back to the Roni Shegavare. Roni Yapo Majena, then again like Hegana Yapo Yomari, then the Roni to pay Yapo Shegavare. Pena, Tangaronda Uchi. Suji. There's a choro so much, Suji and the Yapo Yogamari, Naron Suji then. 괜찮다 고요 말이. 나로 끝이 주로 끝이나 야고요 말이지 나 끝이디나. 배 괜찮다고 주어래. 대인나는 나로 칸이 라지더라. 나로고 수마지 랑케디 수마지 빠진 거 말이. 그 마지 랑케디 그 마지 빠진 거 말이. 대인들이 로니 야고지요 거 말이. 야고지 제거 말이. 그다음에 로니 야고지면은 야라. 배나 등하시나 야고요 거 말이. 나로 등하시디나 괜찮다고 저디요 말이. Ra, oh, Tetty in the downtown Lajide, Roni Yabu, Giogavari. Tata Saint Jatonji, certain. The year of you do, then we heard.
The fourth one is called simply to act accordingly, or if we put it into English, practice what you preach. So then this is one should act according to the vows you hold and the teachings you're given. Practice according to the meanings you're teaching. And this is very straightforward. It means if a teacher is advising the students to do something, to act in a certain way, and they can't maintain that themselves, then of course it sets a bad example. It makes no sense. If you're telling people not to kill, to protect life, and the teacher himself kills and doesn't protect life, if the teacher's saying not to steal and the teacher himself is involved in shady dealings, and then it's completely contrary. So the teacher should be the ideal example of the teachings that his or she is giving. So with those, we have what are called the 4 ways of gathering, and these 4 ways of gathering are one of the main points for the specific benefiting of beings, which in this case is benefiting beings through the teachings, so that's why it's advice for a teacher. And with that, we've covered the 3 sorts of right conduct of avoiding harm, right conduct as nurturing virtue, and right conduct as benefiting other beings.
다 대다와 다 송지생 dombangaru go 다 차디 되라나 다 dom바드 가리치 메바촌도 와리 dom바드 가리주 동도 와리라나 다 동화데 기바리 dom바 동동
단다 나 괜찮아
dom바 동화 당가로서 dom바 가송내 동해 바리 드니 dom바가 처로 송저데 기레 다 dom바드 바 동화 송니 dom바데 메바 가리라고 쳐교리 다 더히 바리.
So then, now having looked at the vow and nurturing the vow in these last ones, now we look at the losing the vow, downfalls from the vow.
다더 가린다고 지레지나는 생체律 동주 생체律 동세지도 생체 가통하라 그거 말이 다리라리 생체 싫어 오빠 도나는 길로 동거나요 더니 dom바라 동로드.
So as we just saw, if we deceive sentient beings, then this causes the loss of the aspiration bodhicitta vow, and this deceiving means even deceiving one being. As soon as you've deceived one person, you've lost the vow.
더니 너부 취결라 시바. 더리가 부취 너부 취결 세지와. 다 너부 취결 변하는 贵你了呢真些吧。等你呢你就没了你就不些吧。等你呢想起来了有些吧。打的这个，呀，这才这个呢用，等你呢，兄弟生意当把动作有吧嘞。
So then we saw 4 things for the causes to lose the. Because before we were looking at how to maintain the vow by avoiding those things. Now we're looking at the same things really, but if they're done, then it's a downfall. So if there are those 4 dark actions, deceiving a teacher, causing somebody to regret what is not to be regretted, insulting a bodhisattva, or deceiving any sentient being, any of those will cause loss of the vow.
等于呢，首先个他在于东华些，他那个扎通下到去的，在于东华，他得到了东华克，翁博然真他妈上了店里去扎通他去吧，他这搞的修难度呢，当把动作没把敲着敲吧的。
And then also what we were hearing this afternoon in terms of conduct to avoid in order to keep the vow, then if one doesn't avoid those conducts, you lose the vow. So then that we had the 5 for the king, 5 for the minister, 8 for the lay person, and then the 4 for the middling person, and the 1 for the less gifted person. By losing any one of those, by breaking any one of those, then the vow is lost.
他的别那呢，现在真理都东安中州阿里拉呢，他扎通就动的，他都提了给几个别那对交际下彩里头你扎通中州阿里的呢，都用就他们对，他提了用掐钱找几个跟对，他掐钱找几个就得了，懂不？掐钱一找几个跟对。
So those are called root downfalls or root breakages. And then,
他第大部个东安新中了啊，第东安中节头三了，真理到你东安中，咋东中当把店里面把人如今呢，这是他们的，第二用他东部都那呢，上把第二呢，沿着我去冲个的，第沿着我去冲，等你对手去冲呢，他领的呢，等你东，当把店面着吧的。
These breakages, or potential breakages, these actions become downfalls and breakages if they're not repaired within what is called 1 session of the day. 1 session of the day in most commentaries means 4 hours.
他第一弄你别那一个头打开的这个人呢，进门切吧修吧，他进去没办了修吧。第东啊，开始写学呢的，第咋都得着了，进门切吧了修吧。第，等你呢，我啥都拆没吧，这个你，好呀，等你呢，对了，原点子大吧，这个上。呀，他别那呢，当把怕没记得了呢，一冲个话的来的，他第一垃圾的了呢，东部的开始的呢，进门去吧，进去没吧，的，马上我个别那现在了偏多了面上吧，这我的，等着我进来上弄东呢，对了用进去没吧，的落的，进门去吧这我，好呀，等你呢，你把的我啥吃没吧。好呀，第二了，别搞吧，他别也不在那着，第二了，别上把地上的东西的，但我才吃没记得怕有个那别先搞吧要吧，第二的别养点也不行的，但等你等这些个呢也不对上去，养点了上弄东吧，搞吧养点，好呀，他进去没吧，第二呢，养点。gawa Once a train, you can do it. When I dig the tongue.
The Shipoyore, the Shipoyore and Shikinanga Chikina.
Gina, don't you do Rolemari. Pena, you are using as so you are the leader with the Tonda, the Yahanda with the the Yoda Tona, the knee, Tanto Lindesona, the need to want you to
if there's been one of these downfalls and it needs to be repaired within a session, if it's not fixed within a session, and if there are 4 factors present, then that means you've lost the vow. I hope that's clear. So there needs to lose the vow totally, there need to be 4 factors present, and the remedy is not applied within 4 hours, within a session. The 4 factors are these. First is that you maintain the action. So, for instance, if it's this thought of, I wouldn't benefit that person even if I could, then you don't just have the thought once, you keep thinking it, and you maintain that attitude throughout the 4-hour period. So it's an unbroken, contrary or negative attitude. This is one factor. A second factor is that one has no shame or loss of dignity about that. These 2 terms are quite important in Buddhist virtue. The first is in relation to yourself, where it's your own sense of dignity about the way you act. The other is a sense of shame, where you realize that other people is in relation to other people's judgment of your action. So without either of those, concerning what you've done, you're not ashamed of it, and you haven't felt loss of dignity through it. The third thing is that you're happy about what you did, no regret. And the fourth thing is that even you think it was a good thing to do, the right thing to do. So when those 4 factors are present in the continuity, no shame or loss of dignity, rejoicing in it, and feeling it has qualities, and it's not repaired within the time of a session, then the vow is lost.
Then you tell to Zono, Takarinda was a gorilla, that Nienten, the Chatulum won't be chatty. Chatulum, I want Chiso Yana do. When Chiso yearly to so and days on that. Then you send you down my paper chandore. That Chiso Yana no lana, or Tangan Dimon and Jopanochi, see one. Shop a sego di tirano. Don't you take you for Mari? That's so you're going to temper Mari. Nah? Tanga Dimon is on the Lemagona, Tanga Dimas or Tarimasong and Jopatis Marle Matana, then Chiso Yagina. Then to my own so about the Sony Domami Pachanori.
This time period is 1/6 of a day, so that makes it, in the way we count these days, 4 hours in a 24-hour day. So if within that 4-hour period you realize that something's gone wrong, you realize that your mentality's lost in something negative, or that you've done a wrong action, and then you think, must do something about that, and you do whatever needs to be done about it, a confession, a repairing of the vow, then it can be saved. But if 4 hours have gone by before you feel like doing something about it, or before you remember to do something about it, then the bodhisattva vow has been lost.
다 우수그 이견다고도 소마도 산다고도 민다고 진다고도 더니요 탄 계속 이게 마송나 자동 jun체 이거 뭐 말이지 다 니바 체시요 말에 오메나 bombo 오메나 니지 다 된디죠 동아견도 연주 그거 말에 메바 메바라고 쳐요 봐 말에 디 넘바때니 메바라고 쳐가나 더 이거 소마도 계속 용다 이견다고 준로 더거 봐다 된디 거거든.
If of those 4 factors there are only 3 or 2 or 1, then it's not a root downfall and the whole vow is not lost. It's damaged to a greater or to a lesser degree. It's still a failing, but it's not totally lost.
다 나로서 동안 주나 니반 주나 다 가르쳐 그러지나나 다와 소트지 지거라 다 대라는 소종세 근데 요나는 넘바 때니 메바 쳐서나 넘바 사바셔 거래 사바셔나 토바래 소다라지나 가송이 토바 말에 송어래 용지 생제 넘바이나 용지 생나 혀 주바래 좀 드니 만다봐요 바래 드니 넘바라 동안라고 용 때니 메바 세원 세면나 다 롱고 소종다래 다 들리시기용 야소 중도 드니 혀파 세사다는 다 용지 생바 라 소완데 농기님보라 용지 생바 농기님보라 소완데 드니는 풍보선바 동서 마로란다 풍보선바시 ndo indong jiwa moya den dong jida ta tri shi ni kya ba xie ji dong de ni jiang de ga ro so yong de xiong ji sen ji dang ba lan ta tri shi de yin na dang ba me pa chao so na dang ba de ya so ro du dang ba la tong an ju na tong a de ya pu su ro du de ni de ra na jiang de xiong ji sen ji dang ba lan xiong dong lan ta tri shi ji de be ga chi bon da wo chao de yo ba re ta de wa so ji dong ya nyong ba su ji ta ta re
if it does happen that the vow has been damaged or lost, then it needs to be healed if it's been damaged, and it needs to be retaken if it's been lost. And then there are various ways to do this. If it has been damaged, injured, then the way we restore it or heal it can be through what's called the sobjong, or the restoring ceremony. It can be through the recitation that we get from the great Bodhisattva Akashagarbha. It can be through reading the 3 heaps, the Triskanda Sutra. There are various traditional ways of recognizing one's failings and restoring them, bringing them back to good. If the vow has actually been lost, then we need to take it afresh. We need to retake the Bodhisattva vow, and there are various ways of doing this, either formally or informally by oneself. And the Bodhisattva vow, in one way, is something we take again and again all the time. And in this respect, it's different from the pratimoksha vows. The self-liberation vows, pratimoksha vows, if they are broken and lost, that's it. When they're totally broken, when there's a root downfall, then they can't be retaken. But with the Bodhisattva vow, it can be retaken if it's been broken, and it can be retaken many, many times.
Tani chongji senji pengyang ta pengyang na dari kama la ki nuna nan tati dhubu chongji yu gombo dewa lana mi pato ji ta nika yung dewa po de mi pato bari kari dina sala na chongji senji na katsuma gabu si kiyo bari tala yabu zi kiyo bari teni na korong yu chepo cha kiyo bari pena ngarong so sajan ndata abal sono tona pena tangron rawo ki la shanda rata ni mumbo yo bari tala yapo se na katsuma ngarong so la ye kiyo ba mari katsuma de la hon de la le mo ga de la hon ta teni se korong yo ma ta de la gabu cho bari ta kari dina korong yapo se da tangron yin na yo ngarong so la tsun ko teni se yo mari pena ngarong so tangron rawo se ko ta teni se de na korong yo he ngarong so de la ja ma ho pa pe ye ni go korong yo dungan rawo pe len ro yo bari te yo kari la na ngaro su jela xiong xi chen yo be nji yo be yo ba yo me pen ba xi me xi ta ta la tu yo ba re ta ta go ni ka la yong sen jia la pen sen jia la de bo re ji dong ngaro yo de bo re ji te sa ma yin na yong ta 지 대화 좀 해 반주지 타바도 통신 챔피언 토지 다 정신생 요나 대축 면아 대면라고지 저도 말해 되니 디질라나 저기 저기 다 지대면
Now we turn to the benefits of the bodhicitta, of the bodhisattva mind. And there are ultimate benefits and there are temporary or provisional benefits. In the meantime, while we're waiting to get the ultimate benefits, the ultimate benefit of bodhicitta is that one becomes a Buddha, one becomes totally free and enlightened. The provisional benefit between now and then is just so much happiness, so many happinesses of every sort that come through the loving, compassionate mind and activity of the bodhisattva. It makes the mind itself rejoice and be happy, and it brings supportive and positive responses from other beings and the environment, and this is also another source of happiness, happiness from within and happiness from without. That loving, caring mind and life of the bodhisattva is something that the goodness of which can be appreciated by everybody. And if we take a very simple example, in a country like this, then people have pets and they care for animals and they look after them very nicely. They're beings of the lower realms. They could be considered as being objectionable, horrible, and mistreated, but then they're taken into our lives, they're treated with amazing affection and care and pampered, and this is because we care for them. We can see the benefits all round. It's nice for the people who've got pets, and it's nice for the pets themselves. I think that's, so then this is a simple example of loving care and kindness. But as far as the bodhicitta is concerned, it is solely a source of great happiness in the meantime, and it is the reason for the ultimate happiness of enlightenment. And this takes us to the end of the session, and there's maybe time for one quick question. Mm-hmm.
Because I mind that when we vote in the government, because of their policy, and there may be policies that are beneficial to all beings, but things change once a government has been elected, and then they may take our country into war.
Uh-huh.
How don't you say our responsibility? Because we voted them in, and they made a decision to go to war.
Le Drungje Ko, Le Drungje Ko. The Layina, Misoso Gile Yore, Yanti Mato, then Mimambu Ge Zokpag Le Yore, then Pena Naranso, the Shung Yoreba, Shung Yimpa, the Naranso Latini, the Shung Kanyan Yore. Vote. I don't know how to say vote. Pena lo shiri shiri naranso de shung de ge. Vote. 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 Oh, that's thank you. Naranso ki vote latene. Naranso ki vote latene dene shung de dan de yore. Dene pena shung de yoshanda la map job ni na. Dene mishanda la segire. Then the naranso misoso gile rebe marbe naranso givot mena then shung de yamare
ya musoso la leo pare ti leda musoso xeo pare xian de naranso la leo pare naranso xeo pare ti leda jitu tu yo pare Karejina Yaposena, the leader Yapochando Yobari, Dujoisena, the leader Dujochando Yobari, Tindi Tirana, Matanti the lady, Missy Yobari, Tinda, Tangarongo, Lee saw the Tilan, 야포지고 거니 써가 말이 나랑 그 선노 동동시니 티라요 몰라요 팬트 서지레티 또 롱라 팬디오 바리 동도 리드 리드 나랑 게야포 시 생자라 팬도 생자라 팬 토지시 드리시드이나 나랑 뭐 체르로 뭐 치고 촌도 바리 마음 발라요 나랑 송지도 바리 디뭐 어디 리드 롱시 바리 Then, who knows you now? Is it bought? Roji, Logere, Lujo Barry? The little Tirana, the Mayapo Mundu, the Yapore, Naron Shure, the Gamba Shure, Yapo Mundu, Tani, who know Luna? The Chonsis and Big don't know what Yapo Mare. Ready? Ah, deep mother Luna Mokangala pay Pantuchi Mundu, deep mother Luna Pantuchi Romundu. Then goes on Luna. This on but the Chonsis and Chonro Kubari. The Naron Shure, the Lugana Garoso Kendware, the Yang Shure, Lugana Coroso Kendware, so the Nick Chodon was on Uhu Luna. Then Chonsis and Ponjare, Sombaya Pomare. And the mother Lugana, Momobola Pentu, no Lugana, Momobola, no Passiano, do Sonzi and Rawogo. Sombala sono Tony, Ushulina, the Hushu Petu, Chebuchovari. Then you more jena Ndravore. More Jaga Sanjala no Pasidina. Naroso could pay Kato Contus, nobody pay Seta, Kato Conti Shagadu. Then more Jaga Sanjala Pantuzi Reduna, Naron Dragon and Didiore, Donna Pato Gori. Mari. Coso. Yeah, the retro. Yeah.
It's each person's karma depends on themselves and their own mind. So when it comes to voting, when we vote in a government, if we vote in a government because we think, sorry, there was a long preamble to that. So then, if we have a positive and a virtuous attitude, and through that then we do virtuous actions, then gradually as lives go by, things get better and better, the intention gets purer and purer, the actions get better and better. All of that is what leads us to enlightenment through the good karma and the good intentions. But then each person is responsible for building up their own karma in that journey, and that karma is built up by their attitude and by their actions. So when we vote in a government, if our mind as a voter is a mind that likes some and detests others in the field of choices, that's not really a bodhisattva's mind, putting some down, putting others up. The attitude, the purer attitude, is just simply to look who can bring the most benefit to sentient beings or to the population or whatever it is. So one's looking out of all the candidates, who, in your own opinion, is going to bring the most benefit. Then if you vote with that pure intention because you're wishing to benefit beings and you're hoping that they do, then that's nothing but good karma. And it all depends on your own motivation and attitude. If you were voting that person in to make a war, and you have that intention, then that's different. But if it's just that you voted that person in because you thought they'd do the best for the country, and then afterwards they do something, that doesn't mean that's your group karma. It means your group karma is what your mind, the word is rejoicing in, or is in harmony with. So it's like if they're soldiers, and the soldiers can hurt people, they can kill people in battle. Soldiers can also help out the population sometimes. So it depends what your mind is supporting, what actions your mind is supporting, then those actions you get the karma of.
Ndortsu duna li sona chorongo li sona yana matuna li so yo mari. Ndortsu duna. Tani yana tuna li so gudu. Yana somba yapo. Yana ru yapo shina li yapo so do mari. San yo yapo yo telane tiani lungo yo yapu yo sona le yapu sondo bare oya yana dujo la uchi che sona sen yo dujo lungo dujo cho sona le dujo chondo bare tina le so se di telana yapu inanda dupo inanda rongo so go di tela yame na le tiani so jo bare katwa de yana du go bare penan gemile so gana yana du go bare mugibile so gana yana du go bare rongo le so go du katwa yana du go bare de rongo so jo bare yame na tawre da yana yapu se goji to rongo le yapu so go de yana du go bare yame na le so jo mere ta yana so no go bare
So, what we build up or we establish our own karma ourselves. We build it up through our motivation, through the way we use our mind, and we build it up through actions. All of those are related to other beings. There is, without other, there is really no action that's possible. All of karma is related to relationship with other. And then what we do with a good attitude, with a noble attitude, good attitude, builds up the positive karma. And what we do with a negative attitude towards the other, a harmful attitude towards the other, builds up negative karma. It's always like that. It depends on a relationship with other, and then it depends on our own mind, what karma we ourselves generate. At first I thought he was saying that it always depends on us, it doesn't depend on what other people do, but he was in fact making the point that whatever we do is always in relation with something other or someone other. Otherwise there isn't action.
That's only la hok go here. Hok don't hear. To dealing at Katwa on here to the security, the Nana Dombane Hugori, the Nante Dombason Domahina, Yapomundi Tani, Ta Dombasan here, the Inason Hok Dombaco here, Tasha.
And so tomorrow we move on in our study of the vows to the Vajrayana vows and explaining the sort of commitments that we have when we receive empowerments and so on.
doing the same with